You're listening to Stoic and Still, a gentle place for those who grow in silence and rise with quiet inner depth. Have you ever left a conversation feeling drained, confused, or vaguely guilty without knowing why? Have you ever sensed that someone close to you carries a storm behind their smile and that you're slowly becoming the one who has to weather it? Have you ever found yourself trying to solve someone else's emotional chaos until one day you no longer recognized yourself? If any of this resonates, you're not imagining things, and you're not alone. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, devoted his life to mapping the hidden forces of the human psyche, the parts of us we don't see, don't admit, or simply cannot face. His work revealed a truth both terrifying and liberating, that the greatest danger we face from others is not what they consciously do, but what they unconsciously carry. Because when someone refuses to face their inner darkness, that shadow doesn't disappear. It seeks a host, and far too often, that host is you. This video is not about obvious villains. It's not about people who set out to harm you with cruelty or malice. It's about the ones who don't even realize what they're doing. The ones who are so entangled in their unconscious mind that being near them slowly erodes your peace, your energy, and your sense of self. In this series, we will walk through 8 deeply dangerous personality patterns, 6 drawn directly from Jung's writings, and 2 expanded from his theories to reflect the complexities of today's world. But this is not just about others. Jung warns that all of us, at some point, carry traces of these shadows within. The danger is not in recognizing them, but in denying that they exist. So, as you listen, I invite you to reflect openly. Have I met someone like this? Have I, even unknowingly, become like this? If any description resonates, leave a comment. Your words might not just be a confession, they might become someone else's realization. Now, let's begin. 1. The unconscious manipulator. This person doesn't yell, they don't demand, and they rarely accuse. Instead, they draw you in through empathy. At first, they seem sensitive, deeply emotional, even wounded. You think you can help them. You want to understand them. But over time, you start to feel responsible for emotions that aren't yours, reactions that aren't rational, and crises you didn't cause. This is the quiet, invisible world of the unconscious manipulator. Jung described projection as one of the most dangerous forces in human psychology because it happens without awareness. When someone refuses to see a part of themselves, that part gets projected outward onto someone else. And if you're close to them, chances are it's you. Suddenly, you're not a person anymore. You're a mirror, a symbol, a savior, or worse, a villain. You get blamed for their anger, held accountable for their sadness, even resented for their feelings of inadequacy. You begin to ask yourself, did I do something wrong? Was I really insensitive? Am I the problem? The truth is, you're being pulled into a storm that never belonged to you. What makes this type so insidious is their ability to appear fragile and well-meaning. They rarely lash out aggressively. Instead, they shape your behavior through subtle emotional pressure. They don't say, "You're hurting me," but they sigh when you speak your truth. They don't forbid you from leaving, but their silence punishes you when you do. Jung warned that this kind of psychic entanglement is not only disorienting, it is soul-destroying. The longer you remain in the orbit of an unconscious manipulator, the more your own psyche begins to distort. You stop trusting your intuition. You edit your truth. You shrink. And the worst part, you think you're being kind. You think you're helping. But what you're really doing is sacrificing your psychological clarity to keep someone else comfortable in their unconsciousness. If this sounds familiar, write in the comments. Have you experienced this silent takeover? Have you ever felt like you were solving someone else's pain while slowly losing yourself? Because the first step to protecting yourself is to name it. And now that we have, let's move on to the second type. The one who hides behind the perfect mask, whose smile shines brightly, but whose soul has gone silent. The bearer of the persona. 2. The bearer of the persona. Not all danger looks like chaos. Some of it looks like perfection. There are people whose smiles are always ready, whose tone is always calm, whose lives seem impeccably ordered, and yet, when you are near them, something feels off. You can't explain it, but the air is thin. The connection feels scripted. Welcome to the world of the bearer of the persona. Jung described the persona as the mask we wear to navigate society, the social role we play, the identity we create to be accepted. In itself, this is not a problem. Everyone needs a persona. We use it to function, to communicate, to adapt. But danger arises when someone becomes the mask, when they lose touch with their authentic self beneath the surface. The bearer of the persona is someone who has become so identified with how they appear that they've forgotten how they truly feel. They are often praised, admired, even envied. But the price of this admiration is internal exile. They have banished their vulnerability, their raw emotions, their shadows, to maintain an image. And what's more subtle, yet more dangerous, is that they expect you to do the same. You find yourself suppressing emotions around them. You hesitate to share your doubts. You feel the need to be composed, agreeable, polished. Why? Because any deviation from the script makes them uncomfortable. Your authenticity threatens the illusion they've worked so hard to sustain. Jung warned that this kind of psychological repression leads to neurosis, emotional detachment, and the death of true connection. The bearer of the persona isn't dangerous because they're malicious. They're dangerous because they unknowingly pull others into their performance. You don't just interact with them, you get recruited into the play. Over time, you start to monitor yourself. You smile more than you mean. You laugh on cue. You downplay your sadness. And eventually, you begin to forget who you are when you're not performing. Living alongside someone like this can feel like walking on stage every day. No script, but a constant need to get it right. And this erodes your spontaneity, your joy, and your emotional truth. Have you ever experienced this? Have you been in a relationship, romantic, familial, or professional, where everything looked perfect but felt empty? Where you weren't allowed to be messy or real or fully human? If so, share it below. Jung believed that the first step to reclaiming your inner truth is recognizing where and when you've been asked to abandon it. Because beneath every polished mask lies a suffocated soul. And if you stay too long in their world, you risk suffocating your own. Let us now turn to the third type, the one who strives so hard to be good and pure that their repressed darkness eventually explodes. The one who tries to be light all the time until the shadow takes over. The owner of the repressed shadow. The owner of the repressed shadow. There are people who appear endlessly calm, poised, and composed. They are polite, disciplined, emotionally measured. They rarely raise their voice and almost never show rage, jealousy, or sadness. On the surface, they seem to have it all together. But beneath that smooth exterior lies a storm, unseen, unspoken, and tightly sealed. This is the owner of the repressed shadow. According to Jung, the shadow is the collection of everything we refuse to see in ourselves. Our rage, envy, fear, pride, sexuality, and ambition. It contains not just the bad, but the raw, unfiltered truths of our humanity. And when we refuse to acknowledge these truths, they do not disappear. They grow in silence, until one day they burst forth with frightening force. The owner of the repressed shadow is someone who has spent years or decades denying the darker aspects of their psyche. They try so hard to be good, kind, moral, and balanced that they repress anything that doesn't fit that image. But repression is not resolution. It is pressure. And pressure always finds a release. Jung warned that the stronger the persona, the more dangerous the shadow. This means that the more someone tries to be perfect, the more they push their darkness into the unconscious, and the more violently it returns. You might recognize this person by their disproportionate reactions. They explode over minor issues. They hold grudges for years. They judge others harshly for things they secretly fear in themselves. They appear emotionally mature until you touch a nerve they didn't even know they had. Living with someone like this is like walking through a beautiful house built over a landmine. Everything looks peaceful until it isn't. Worse still, they may judge you for expressing emotions they cannot accept in themselves. If you cry, they call you weak. If you get angry, they call you unstable. If you express desire, they shame you for it. This is not because they are evil, it's because your freedom triggers their repression. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The owner of the repressed shadow is a person being unconsciously ruled by what they've refused to face, and the people closest to them often pay the price. Have you ever experienced this type? Have you loved someone whose silence held more violence than words ever could? Have you felt judged for being emotional while knowing deep down that they were the ones hiding the chaos? If you've been there, or if you've ever repressed your own truth to look good, share it in the comments. Jung believed that naming the shadow is the first step to disarming it. Now, we move forward to the fourth type. A person who weaponizes righteousness and uses guilt as their language of control. Someone who acts holy, but hides their shame behind virtue. Meet the moral controller. The moral controller. Not all oppression looks like tyranny. Some of it wears the face of virtue. There are people who speak softly, quote spiritual texts, talk endlessly about values, and claim to stand for righteousness, but underneath their moral facade lies a deep discomfort with their own desires, a refusal to face their inner contradictions. These are the moral controllers. Jung saw this pattern as one of the most insidious. When someone cannot accept their own humanity, its messiness, impulses, contradictions, they begin to project that discomfort outward. They don't see you as you are. They see you as a threat to the illusion of their purity, and so they judge. The moral controller may not scream or punish you outright, but their disapproval is constant. It arrives in small sighs, subtle glances, pointed phrases like, "That's not right," or "I'm just saying this for your own good." They shame you not with cruelty, but with virtue. Jung warned that when morality becomes a mask, it ceases to guide and begins to imprison. These individuals use rules not to inspire, but to control. Their language is full of duty, sacrifice, and obedience, but beneath it all is fear. Fear of what they would feel if they let go, fear of the chaos they've buried, fear of their own shadow. The most dangerous part, they genuinely believe they are helping. They're convinced they're the voice of reason, the beacon of light. But in reality, they're running from their own darkness, using you as the scapegoat. If you've ever been around someone like this, you know the feeling. You begin to feel guilty for being yourself. You shrink your joy so they won't accuse you of pride. You silence your anger so they won't call you sinful. You suppress your desires so you won't be called selfish. Slowly, you begin to perform morality to protect the relationship. And in doing so, you start to lose your truth. Jung emphasized that true moral development cannot happen without integrating the shadow. Pretending to be pure only deepens repression, and what's repressed becomes toxic. So ask yourself, have you ever been around someone whose idea of goodness felt more like a prison than a path? Have you ever been manipulated by someone who claimed to be saving you? Or, more vulnerably, have you ever caught yourself judging others harshly, not out of wisdom, but out of fear? If any of that rings true, share it below. We cannot heal what we refuse to name. Now, we move to a different kind of danger, one that doesn't hide behind morality, but one that is ruled by emotional chaos. The fifth type is unpredictable, unstable, and driven by unconscious wounds. They don't control, they erupt. Meet the complexed individual. The complexed individual. They hug you in the morning and hurt you by night. They laugh with you one day and withdraw in silence the next. They seem generous until a simple gesture from you ignites an emotional storm. These are not monsters. They are people ruled by something they don't understand. Internal forces from the past still echoing in the present. This is the complexed individual. Jung described complexes as autonomous clusters of emotion and memory that live in the unconscious. They are formed by trauma, neglect, humiliation, betrayal, any experience powerful enough to shape how we respond to the world. A complex is like a wound that hasn't healed, and when triggered, it takes over. The complexed individual does not react to you. They react to what you unknowingly represent. A harmless question may remind them of a controlling parent. A kind gesture might evoke a long-forgotten betrayal. You are not speaking to the person in front of you, you are speaking to the past, alive and unhealed. What makes this person so dangerous is their unpredictability. They don't mean to hurt you, but they will, and afterward, they may not even understand what happened. There may be apologies, even tears, but the same cycles repeat. Jung saw this as one of the most painful unconscious patterns, when someone's emotional center is hijacked by unintegrated memories. These people aren't evil, they're haunted, and anyone close to them becomes collateral. If you live with someone like this, you know the toll. You begin to anticipate their moods. You speak carefully. You avoid certain topics. You walk on emotional eggshells. Not out of fear of violence, but out of exhaustion. You just want peace. But there is no peace when the past is constantly being projected onto the present. Even worse, these people can be loving, they can be kind, they can be deeply remorseful, and that makes it harder to leave, harder to set boundaries, harder to admit, this is hurting me. Jung believed that healing these wounds requires deep inner work, a commitment to self-observation, therapy, and radical honesty. But until that happens, the complex rules the person, and through them, it rules you. So I ask, have you been caught in this cycle? Have you tried to love someone who keeps switching between tenderness and torment? Have you seen glimpses of beauty only to be dragged back into chaos? If so, leave a comment. You're not weak for being caught in this pattern, but you are responsible for recognizing it and freeing yourself. Next, we meet a very different kind of threat. Not explosive, not reactive, but draining. A person who doesn't lash out, but slowly empties you with neediness, guilt, and emotional dependency. Let's talk about the psychic vampire. 6. The psychic vampire. You don't see them coming. They don't yell, manipulate, or explode. In fact, they may seem warm, gentle, even affectionate, but somehow, every time you spend time with them, you leave feeling tired, foggy, emotionally drained. This is not just a difficult person. This is the psychic vampire. Jung never used this exact term, but he deeply understood the psychological reality behind it. These are people who, unable to sustain their own inner life, attach themselves to yours. They feed on your energy, not because they are evil, but because they are empty. The psychic vampire often shows up as the overly dependent friend, the helpless partner, the always in crisis relative. They rely on your support, not occasionally, but constantly. They need your time, your attention, your reassurance, and when they don't get it, they withdraw, guilt trip, or spiral. What makes them dangerous is not aggression, it's erosion. Your space becomes their comfort zone. Your peace becomes their refuge. And before you realize it, your life begins to revolve around maintaining their emotional balance. At first, you feel compassionate. You want to help. You listen to their problems, offer advice, check in often. But slowly, you begin to notice the cost. Your own needs are neglected. Your thoughts are clouded. Your energy feels stolen. Jung warned that these kinds of relationships are a major obstacle to individuation, the process of becoming whole. Why? Because in a symbiotic bond, you are not two individuals, you are fused, and in that fusion, your identity begins to dissolve. The psychic vampire doesn't want a partner. They want a container, someone to hold their unresolved pain, someone to carry their inner chaos. And when you start pulling away, when you set a boundary, they feel abandoned, they accuse, they collapse. Suddenly you're not a person anymore, you're a lifeline, and lifelines don't get to rest. This dynamic is dangerous not because it's explosive, but because it's seductive. You feel needed, you feel important. But what you're really doing is losing yourself, bit by bit. Jung believed that healing only happens when two people can stand as whole individuals, each owning their wounds, each responsible for their emotions. Anything else becomes parasitic. So, ask yourself, have you ever been drained by someone who claimed to love you? Have you sacrificed your own energy just to keep someone else stable? And harder still, have you ever been the one doing the draining? This is not about blame. It's about awareness. Comment below if you've lived this dynamic from either side. The more we speak it, the more we see it, and the more we can change it. Next, we shift into uncharted territory. Beyond Jung's documented types, there are modern psychological patterns that extend his work, one of which we explore next. A person whose danger lies not in neediness, but in illusion. The one who crafts reality to suit their comfort, even if it means distorting yours. Up next, the emotional illusionist. 7. The emotional illusionist. This person is not loud, they are not aggressive, they might even seem wise, soft-spoken, and emotionally intelligent, but behind their polished insights and spiritual language lies a hidden trap. They don't want the truth, they want comfort. They don't process reality, they reshape it to protect themselves. This is the emotional illusionist. This individual doesn't lie maliciously, they lie unconsciously. Not to hurt you, but to protect their fragile ego. They have spent years crafting a version of themselves that must be preserved at all costs. When conflict arises, they don't face it, they reframe it. When they're wrong, they call it miscommunication. When you express a need, they say you're being negative. Jung warned about the dangers of spiritual bypassing when people use lofty language, abstract ideals, or surface-level positivity to avoid their shadow. The emotional illusionist is a master at this. Instead of addressing what's difficult, they spiritualize it, minimize it, or twist it into something you can't argue with. They say things like, everything happens for a reason, while refusing to take responsibility. You're being too sensitive when you're simply being honest. Let's not focus on the past when the past is still hurting you in the present. This distortion doesn't look dangerous, it looks enlightened, but it slowly destabilizes your reality. You begin to doubt your emotions, you question your reactions, you feel like the problem, even when you're the one showing up with honesty. Jung believed that true growth comes not from denying emotion, but from integrating it. The emotional illusionist skips this process. They turn every pain into a metaphor, every wound into a parable, and in doing so, they escape accountability. Being close to someone like this is maddening. You cannot resolve conflict because they won't acknowledge there is one. You cannot express pain because they'll redefine it as projection. You cannot speak your truth because they've already rewritten the story. You may leave every conversation feeling like you just debated someone in a dream, disoriented, invisible, unreal. So ask yourself, have you ever felt emotionally gaslit by someone who seemed spiritual? Have you ever had your truth repackaged in a way that served someone else's peace but destroyed your clarity? If so, name it below. Jung taught that wholeness requires truth, not illusion. And the greatest service we can offer one another is not constant comfort, but shared reality. Now we move to the eighth and final type, a person who seems strong, driven, charismatic, but who lives entirely in their mind. A person disconnected from emotion, obsessed with control, and terrified of vulnerability. Someone who dominates, not to hurt, but to never be hurt again. Meet the armored rationalist. 8. The armored rationalist. They're composed, logical, articulate. Their words are sharp, their insights clean, and their decisions efficient. To many, they seem like leaders, visionaries, protectors of reason. But get too close, and you'll notice something missing. Something cold, impenetrable. Emotion doesn't reach them. Vulnerability repels them. Intimacy feels impossible. This is the armored rationalist. Jung understood this type deeply. He believed that when the intellect becomes too dominant, when thinking becomes a shield rather than a tool, it disconnects us from the very thing that makes us human, feeling. The armored rationalist doesn't intend to harm. Their defense mechanism is not cruelty, it's control. Somewhere in their history they learned that emotion is dangerous, that softness invites chaos, that needing others means risking pain. So they built a fortress of logic, solid, impressive, and impenetrable. They analyze everything. Emotions become problems to solve. Conversations turn into debates. And the moment vulnerability arises, they retreat. Or worse, they diminish it. They'll say, "You're being irrational. That's just your interpretation." Feelings aren't facts. All technically true, but emotionally devastating. Jung wrote that when a person becomes overly identified with their thinking function, their feeling function becomes unconscious and primitive. It doesn't disappear, it just goes into shadow. And when it surfaces, it often comes out in the form of sarcasm, coldness, or emotional neglect. Living with someone like this can feel like living in a sterile, beautiful room, with no warmth. You may have intellectually rich conversations, shared goals, even admiration, but your soul feels unseen, your emotions unmet. You begin to shrink your emotional world to match theirs. You stop expressing needs. You stop crying. You stop hoping for depth. And eventually, you start to feel numb. But here's the paradox. Beneath the armor is often someone deeply sensitive. So sensitive, they had to shut it all down. They don't feel less than others. They feel more. But they never learned how to hold it. So they froze it. And this is what makes them dangerous, not because they're cruel, but because they teach you, by example, to stop feeling. 2. Jung believed that wholeness is not found in intellect alone. It's found in the marriage of thought and feeling, light and shadow, power and softness. So ask yourself gently, have you loved someone who could explain everything, but feel nothing? Have you begun to harden yourself just to stay in their world? And more bravely, have you become this person? If so, speak it below. Because breaking the armor doesn't start with force, it starts with awareness. And now, we have reached the end of this journey, but not the end of your awareness. You've met 8 deeply dangerous patterns, some external, some internal. And the question now is not, have I seen them? But, what will I do now that I have? The greatest danger is not in the unconscious, it's in refusing to see it. Thank you for walking this far. Your courage to look inward is the very thing that will keep you free. So, if this message stirred something inside you, pause, breathe, and honor that inner knowing. Because recognizing these patterns is not just about protection, it's about liberation, not from others, but from the roles we silently agreed to play. If today's reflection resonated with you, share in the comments. I choose awareness over illusion. You might find that someone else has been walking the same quiet path. And if you found value in this journey, don't forget to subscribe to Stoic and Still, where we explore the unseen patterns of the psyche, the depth of the human spirit, and the silence that transforms us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing to look within. And until next time, may your mind stay clear, your heart stay guarded, and your soul remain free. You're listening to Stoic and Still, where deep minds find peace and silent strength becomes your power.